I've always been good at spotting lies. 20 years of editing manuscripts for Riverside Publishing will do that to you. You learn to catch inconsistencies, plot holes, and characters who don't act like real people. What I never expected was to use those skills on my own marriage. It started with Bree's phone buzzing at 2 in the morning. She'd left it charging in the bathroom while she showered, and the notification sound kept going off like a broken alarm clock. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling and fighting another bout of insomnia when I heard it for the 5th time. "Bree, your phone's going crazy," I called out over the sound of running water. No response, just the steady rhythm of her expensive shampoo routine, the one that took exactly 12 minutes and cost more than my monthly coffee budget. The buzzing continued. I rolled out of bed, my bare feet hitting the cold hardwood floor, and padded toward the bathroom. Through the frosted glass of our shower door, I could see Bree's silhouette as she worked conditioner through her auburn hair. She was humming something, a tune I didn't recognize. Her phone sat on the marble countertop, screen lighting up with each new message. I glanced at it without really meaning to, the way you might glance at a car accident while driving past. What I saw made my stomach drop. "Can't wait to taste you again. E." The message preview showed just enough to make my hands shake. I picked up the phone, my editor's brain automatically cataloging details. The timestamp was 2:17 a.m., the contact was saved as Evan R., and there was a string of messages above it that I couldn't see without unlocking the device. "Darren, did you say something?" Bree's voice carried over the shower noise. I set the phone down carefully, exactly where I'd found it. "Just checking on your phone. Lots of notifications." "Probably work stuff. You know how it is." I knew how it was, all right. Bree worked in social media marketing for a boutique firm downtown. Her job involved managing Instagram accounts for local restaurants and small businesses. Hardly the type of work that required urgent messages at 2 a.m., especially not messages about tasting anything. I walked back to bed and lay down, but sleep was impossible now. My mind was racing, connecting dots I didn't want to connect. The late nights at the office, the new workout routine that started 3 months ago, the way she'd been guarding her phone lately, taking it with her to the bathroom, keeping it face down during dinner. The shower stopped. I closed my eyes and tried to look like I was sleeping when Bree emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in her favorite terry cloth robe. She moved quietly around the room, checking her phone before plugging it back in. "Everything okay?" I asked, keeping my voice drowsy. "Just some client emergency. Nothing important." She slipped into bed beside me, smelling like vanilla and lies. I waited until her breathing became deep and regular, then stared at the ceiling for the rest of the night. By morning, I'd made a decision that would change everything. The next day at work, I couldn't concentrate on the romance novel I was supposed to be editing. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, polishing someone else's story about true love and happy endings, while my own marriage crumbled around me. The manuscript was typical genre fiction, a plucky heroine, a misunderstood hero, and a plot that tied up every loose thread with a neat bow. If only real life worked that way. "You look like someone stole your lunch money," Miles said, dropping into the chair across from my desk. Miles Carter had been my closest friend at Riverside for 8 years, ever since he'd started as a junior editor. He was one of those people who seemed to know everyone in town and had an opinion about everything. "Just tired," I said, not looking up from my screen. "Uh-huh, and I'm just devastatingly handsome." Miles leaned forward, lowering his voice. "What's going on, man? You've been staring at the same paragraph for 20 minutes. I glanced around the open office space. Our colleagues were busy with their own projects, but in a place like Riverside, gossip traveled faster than email. The last thing I needed was to become the subject of office speculation before I figured out what was actually happening. "Can we talk later? Maybe grab a drink after work?" Miles studied my face with the same intensity he usually reserved for manuscript deadlines. "This is about Bree, isn't it?" I didn't answer, but my expression must have said enough. "O'Malley's at 6, he said, standing up. "And Darren? Whatever it is, we'll figure it out." The rest of the day crawled by. I managed to edit 3 chapters of the romance novel, making notes about pacing and character development while my own story fell apart. By 5:30, I was ready to leave, but I had one more thing to do. I pulled up my laptop settings and navigated to the family sharing options. Bree and I had linked our devices years ago for convenience, shared photo libraries, app purchases, and automatic backups. It had seemed like a good idea at the time, a symbol of trust and partnership. Now it was going to be my window into the truth. I enabled backup sharing for her device and watched as months of data began syncing to my laptop. Text messages, photos, app data, everything she thought was private was now copying itself to my hard drive. The process would take a few hours, but by tomorrow morning, I'd have answers. O'Malley's was exactly the kind of bar you'd expect to find in a mid-sized main city. Dark wood, local beer on tap, and a bartender who'd been pouring drinks since before I was born. Miles had claimed our usual booth in the back corner, away from the after-work crowd. "All right," he said as I sat down with my beer. "Talk." I told him about the text message, about Bree's recent behavior, about the growing distance between us that I'd been trying to ignore for months. Miles listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or taking a sip of his drink. "Evan R.," he said when I finished. "You have any idea who that might be?" "I've been thinking about it all day. There's an Evan who works at that coffee place downtown, the one Bree's always posting about on Instagram. Grind Coffee Bar. The hipster place with the expensive lattes and the pretentious baristas? That's the one. Bree goes there almost every morning before work. She's always talking about how friendly the staff is, how they know her order by heart." Miles made a face like he'd tasted something sour. "Friendly staff. Right. You want me to do some digging?" "What kind of digging?" "The kind where I happen to need coffee tomorrow morning and strike up a conversation with the locals. You'd be surprised how much people will tell you if you ask the right questions." I considered it. Part of me wanted to know everything immediately, or to rip off the bandage and deal with whatever pain came next. But another part of me, the editor part, knew that good stories required patience and careful investigation. "Not yet," I said. "Let me see what I can find out on my own first." "Fair enough. But Darren, if this is what it looks like, you need to start protecting yourself. Financially, legally, all of it." I nodded, though the reality of those words hadn't fully sunk in yet. 24 hours ago, my biggest worry had been meeting a manuscript deadline. Now I was contemplating the end of my marriage and everything that came with it. We finished our drinks and parted ways in the parking lot. The drive home felt longer than usual, every red light giving me more time to think about what I might find when I got there. Bree's car was in the driveway, but the house was dark, except for the glow of the television in our living room. I found her on the couch, laptop open, scrolling through social media while a cooking show played in the background. "Hey," she said without looking up. "How was your day?" "Fine. You?" "Busy. The Morrison account is being difficult about their new campaign." She closed the laptop and turned to face me. "I might have to work late tomorrow night to get everything sorted out." Another late night, another convenient excuse. I sat down beside her, studying her face for any sign of guilt or nervousness. She looked the same as always, beautiful, composed, completely in control. "Which Morrison account?" I asked. "The restaurant group. They want to change their entire brand strategy 3 weeks before launch." She rolled her eyes dramatically. "Typical client behavior." I nodded like I believed her, but my editor's brain was already fact-checking. Bree had mentioned the Morrison account before, but I was pretty sure their campaign had launched last month. Either I was misremembering, or she was getting her stories confused. "Well, do what you need to do," I said. "I'll probably stay late at the office myself tomorrow. We're behind on the spring catalog." "Okay, I'll probably grab dinner out so I don't have to worry about cooking." More lies, delivered with the same casual tone she might use to discuss the weather. I wondered how long this had been going on, how many stories I'd accepted without question. We watched television for another hour, making small talk about work and weekend plans. It was the kind of comfortable domestic scene that might have seemed normal to an outside observer. But underneath the surface, I could feel everything shifting, like the moment before an earthquake when animals start acting strange. Later that night, as Bree slept beside me, I lay awake planning my next moves. Tomorrow, I'd check the backup data and see what secrets her phone had been keeping. I'd start documenting everything, messages, photos, inconsistencies in her stories. If this marriage was ending, I wanted to be prepared. But first, I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. In my experience, the best way to understand a story was to read it from the beginning. The backup finished syncing at 3:47 a.m. I know because I was awake, staring at my laptop screen in the home office while Bree slept upstairs. The progress bar had been crawling forward for hours, and when it finally completed, I felt like I was about to open Pandora's box. I started with the text messages. The conversation with Evan R. went back 6 weeks, beginning with what looked like innocent customer service interactions about coffee orders, and gradually escalating into something that made my stomach turn. By the 3rd week, they were exchanging photos that had nothing to do with lattes. By the 5th week, they were making plans to meet at his apartment. The worst part wasn't the explicit content, it was how happy Bree sounded. Her messages were full of excitement and anticipation, emotions I hadn't seen from her in months. She wrote about feeling alive again and discovering who I really am. She talked about our marriage like it was a prison sentence she was serving. I screenshotted everything, organizing the evidence into folders by date and contact. My editor's training kicked in, helping me stay methodical even as my world collapsed. By dawn, I had a complete timeline of the affair and a clear picture of what Bree was planning. She wanted to explore her options before making any permanent decisions. She'd already looked into temporary housing and had been researching separation agreements. According to her messages with Evan, she was planning to ask for a trial separation within the week. I closed the laptop and went to make coffee, my hands surprisingly steady. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by something colder and more calculating. If Bree wanted to play games, I'd make sure I knew the rules. She came downstairs at 7:30, already dressed for work in an outfit I didn't recognize, a black dress that was more form-fitting than her usual professional wear. "You're up early," she said, pouring herself a cup of coffee from the pot I'd made. "Couldn't sleep. Big day ahead." She studied my face, and for a moment I thought she might suspect something. But then she smiled, the same bright expression she used for her social media photos. "Actually, I'm glad you're awake. I wanted to talk to you about something." Here it comes, I thought. "What's on your mind?" She sat down across from me at our kitchen island, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug like she was gathering courage. "I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about us, about our relationship." "Okay. I love you, Darren. I want you to know that. But I feel like we've fallen into this routine, this comfortable pattern, and I'm not sure it's healthy for either of us." I took a sip of my coffee and waited for her to continue. She'd clearly rehearsed this speech. "I think we should consider a trial separation, just for a few months to give us both some space to figure out what we really want." "A trial separation," I repeated, keeping my voice neutral. "It doesn't mean our marriage is over. It just means we need time to grow as individuals before we can grow together." She reached across the table and touched my hand. "I need to live for myself and try other experiences to be sure you're the best choice for me." The audacity of it was breathtaking. She was asking for my permission to cheat, wrapping her affair in the language of self-discovery and personal growth. If I hadn't seen the messages, I might have actually fallen for it. "Other experiences," I said. "You know what I mean. We've been together since college. Neither of us has really explored what else is out there." "And you think that's something we need to do?" "I think it's something I need to do." She squeezed my hand. "You're welcome to explore too, obviously. This isn't just about me." I almost laughed. She was offering me the same freedom she'd already been taking for weeks, as if she was doing me a favor. "How long were you thinking?" "Maybe 3 months. I could get a temporary place downtown, and we could check in regularly to see how we're feeling." "You've already looked into housing?" A flicker of something, surprise, guilt, crossed her face. I just wanted to know what our options were before bringing this up. I nodded slowly, as if I was considering her proposal for the first time. "Okay." "Okay? If that's what you need, then let's try it." She blinked, clearly expecting more resistance. "Really? Just like that?" "Bree, if you're not happy, then neither of us is happy. Maybe some space would be good for both of us." Relief flooded her expression. "Thank you for being so understanding. I know this isn't easy." "When were you thinking of moving out?" "This weekend? I found a furnished place that's available immediately." Of course she had. "Whatever works for you." She leaned over and kissed my cheek, and I caught a whiff of a perfume I didn't recognize. "I love you for being so mature about this." After she left for work, I sat in the quiet kitchen and planned my strategy. If Bree wanted a separation, I'd give her exactly what she asked for, along with a few surprises she wasn't expecting. My first call was to the county clerk's office. I needed an official record of our separation date, something that would hold up in court if necessary. The clerk was helpful, explaining that I could file a formal separation agreement that would establish the legal timeline. My second call was to the bank. I opened a new checking account and arranged to have my direct deposit redirected starting the following week. Bree could keep the joint account, but she wouldn't be spending my income while she explored her options. My third call was to our health insurance company. I scheduled a consultation with a paternity specialist, ostensibly for future family planning. The appointment would create a paper trail showing that I was thinking about children and genetic testing, information that might prove useful later. At work, I found it easier to concentrate than I had in weeks. The uncertainty was over, replaced by a clear set of objectives. I was editing a mystery novel that day, and I found myself appreciating the protagonist's methodical approach to solving crimes. Good detectives didn't let emotions cloud their judgment. They gathered evidence, built cases, and waited for the right moment to act. Miles stopped by my desk around lunchtime. You look better today. I feel better. Clarity is a wonderful thing. Want to talk about it? Not yet, but I might need that favor we discussed. Just say the word. That evening, Bree came home with moving boxes and a suitcase. She'd taken the afternoon off to start packing, she explained, and wanted to get settled in her new place as soon as possible. I helped her carry boxes to her car, playing the role of the supportive husband. She packed clothes, personal items, and her laptop, but left most of our shared belongings behind. It was temporary, after all. She'd be back once she'd figured herself out. I'll call you in a few days, she said as she loaded the last box into her car. We should probably set up some ground rules for how this is going to work. Sure, take your time getting settled. She drove away just as the sun was setting, leaving me alone in our house for the first time in 8 years. I poured myself a drink and sat on the front porch, watching the neighbors walk their dogs and water their gardens. Everything looked exactly the same as it had that morning, but the entire world had shifted. I spent the weekend organizing my evidence and researching divorce law in Maine. I learned about asset division, spousal support, and the difference between fault and no-fault proceedings. I read about adultery clauses and how documented infidelity could affect settlement negotiations. Most importantly, I learned about the legal significance of separation dates and how they could impact claims on future income and debts. Bree called on Sunday evening, sounding bright and cheerful. Her new place was perfect, she said. She was already feeling more like herself. She hoped I was doing well and adjusting to the space. I am, I told her. This might be exactly what we needed. I'm so glad you feel that way. I was worried you might be angry or resentful. Not at all. I want you to be happy. You're amazing, Darren. I'm lucky to have you in my life. After we hung up, I saved a recording of the conversation, another piece of evidence for my growing file. Bree might think she was lucky to have me, but she had no idea just how unlucky she was about to become. 3 weeks into Bree's self-discovery journey, the whole town knew about her new relationship. Small cities like ours don't keep secrets well, especially when one half of the couple insists on broadcasting their happiness on social media. Bree's Instagram had transformed from lifestyle content about our home and weekend activities to artistic shots of coffee cups, downtown sunsets, and carefully cropped photos that hinted at a male presence without showing faces. She was building a narrative of independence and adventure, documenting her new life for her 800 followers. What she didn't know was that I'd been documenting too. I'd driven past Grind Coffee Bar enough times to confirm that Evan R. was Evan Rusk, the owner's nephew who'd taken over management 6 months ago. He was exactly what I'd expected. Late 20s, carefully styled beard, the kind of guy who wore vintage band t-shirts that probably cost more than my work shirts. Miles had done his reconnaissance mission, striking up conversations with the morning regulars. According to local gossip, Evan had a reputation for dating customers and had been through several relationships since moving to town. He drove a leased BMW, lived in a trendy apartment complex near the waterfront, and liked to talk about his plans to expand the coffee business into a regional chain. He's a walking cliché, Miles reported over drinks at O'Malley's, the kind of guy who uses words like artisanal and curated in regular conversation. What else did you find out? He's been telling people that you and Bree are getting divorced, says she finally found someone who appreciates her ambition. I almost choked on my beer. He said that? Word for word, according to Janet Morrison. She was in there Tuesday morning and heard him talking to another customer about his amazing new girlfriend who's finally free from a boring marriage. The Morrison name rang a bell. Janet Morrison. Is she related to the restaurant group Bree mentioned? Miles nodded. Her husband owns 3 restaurants downtown. They're also clients of Bree's marketing firm. I felt the pieces clicking together. Bree had been lying about working late on the Morrison account because she was afraid the connection would expose her affair. She didn't know that small-town networks work both ways. The same connections that helped her meet Evan were now spreading news of their relationship. There's something else, Miles said. Vanessa Carter was in there yesterday. Vanessa, or Ness as everyone called her, was Bree's closest friend and biggest enabler. They'd known each other since high school and had maintained one of those intense female friendships that seemed to thrive on drama and shared secrets. What was she doing there? Getting coffee and taking pictures. Lots of pictures. She was documenting everything, the menu, the decor, Evan making drinks, posted it all to her Instagram story with captions about supporting local businesses and discovering hidden gems. I pulled out my phone and checked Ness's social media. Sure enough, there were multiple posts from Grind Coffee Bar, including a short video of Evan explaining their signature brewing process. The comments were full of heart-eye emojis and questions about whether he was single. She's building a narrative, I said. What do you mean? Look at the timing. Bree starts her separation, begins dating Evan, and suddenly Ness is promoting his business to her followers. They're creating a story where Bree discovered this amazing place and this amazing guy organically. Miles studied the posts over my shoulder. You think they're planning something? I think they're planning everything. This isn't just an affair. It's a complete rebranding of Bree's life. That night, I decided it was time to accelerate my own timeline. I'd been patient, gathering evidence and building my case, but Bree and her support network were getting comfortable. They thought they controlled the narrative. It was time to change the story. I started with the financial moves I'd already made. The new bank account was established and my income was safely redirected. I'd also quietly moved our savings into a separate account, leaving just enough in the joint account to cover Bree's immediate expenses. Next, I called my attorney, a recommendation from Miles, who specialized in family law. Margaret Henley was exactly the kind of lawyer I needed. Experienced, pragmatic, and completely unsentimental about marriage. You want to file for separation? She asked after I'd explained the situation. I want to establish the legal timeline, I said. My wife moved out 3 weeks ago to pursue other relationships. I want that date on record. Do you have documentation of her infidelity? Extensive documentation. Good. Maine is technically a no-fault state, but evidence of adultery can still impact asset division and spousal support. How long were you married? 8 years. Any children? No. Property? We own a house together. No other significant assets except retirement accounts and savings. Margaret walked me through the process, explaining how a formal separation agreement would protect my interests and establish clear boundaries for the trial period Bree had requested. The key is timing, she said. If she comes back and wants to reconcile, you want to make sure any decisions are made from a position of strength. What if she doesn't come back? Then you'll be well positioned for divorce proceedings. I signed the paperwork that afternoon, officially documenting the separation date and my wife's stated reasons for leaving. According to the legal filing, Bree had moved out to explore other relationships and determine her true feelings about the marriage. Her own words, carefully preserved from our kitchen conversation 3 weeks earlier. The separation agreement would be served to Bree within a few days, making our trial period official and legally binding. But I had one more surprise planned before she received those papers. That weekend was the annual Riverside Festival, a downtown street fair that drew crowds from across the region. Local businesses set up booths, food trucks lined the streets, and live bands played on multiple stages. It was exactly the kind of community event that Bree loved to attend and document for social media. I knew she'd be there with Evan, probably introducing him to friends and colleagues as her new partner or some other euphemism. They'd take photos, sample food, and continue building their public narrative of happiness and authenticity. I planned to give them a different kind of story. I arrived at the festival early, before the crowds gathered, and found the perfect spot near the main stage. Miles had agreed to meet me there, along with a few other friends from work who were curious about the drama they'd been hearing through the office grapevine. Bree and Evan appeared around noon, just as I'd expected. She was wearing a sundress I'd never seen before and had her arm linked through his as they walked between the vendor booths. She looked radiant, genuinely happy in a way that might have hurt if I hadn't been so focused on my plan. They stopped at the Grind coffee bar booth, where Evan was apparently volunteering to promote his business. Bree took photos of him serving drinks and interacting with customers, playing the role of supportive girlfriend with obvious enthusiasm. I waited until they'd gathered a small crowd of friends and acquaintances, including Ness, who was live streaming the entire experience, before making my move. "Bree!" I called out, approaching their group with a friendly smile. "I thought I might see you here?" She turned, surprise flickering across her face before being replaced by a carefully composed expression. "Darren, hi. I didn't expect to see you." "It's a community festival. We're both part of the community." I extended my hand to Evan. "You must be Evan. I'm Darren, Bree's husband." He shook my hand cautiously, clearly uncertain about how to handle the situation. "Nice to meet you." "Likewise. Bree's told me so much about your coffee shop. She says you make the best lattes in town." "We try to maintain high standards." "I'm sure you do." I turned back to Bree, who was watching our interaction with obvious tension. "How's the separation going? Are you getting everything you need from this experience?" "It's been good," she said carefully. "Very enlightening." "I'm glad. You deserve to explore all your options." I raised my voice slightly, making sure the surrounding crowd could hear. "After all, you said you needed to try other men to be sure I was the best choice?" Bree's face went white. "Darren." "What?" "Those were your exact words, weren't they? You needed to live for yourself and compare your options? I smiled at Evan. I assume you're one of the options she's comparing? The crowd had gone quiet, sensing drama. Ness was still holding her phone, but she'd stopped narrating her live stream. Evan looked like he wanted to disappear. This isn't the place for this conversation, Bree said, her voice tight with embarrassment. You're right. This is a celebration. We should be celebrating your freedom to explore. I pulled out my phone and opened the AirDrop feature. In fact, I think everyone should see how happy you've been during your exploration period. I'd prepared a carefully curated selection of screenshots. Nothing explicit, but enough to show the timeline and nature of her relationship with Evan. With a few taps, I sent the images to every iPhone in range, including those belonging to our friends, colleagues, and random festival goers. Phones started buzzing throughout the crowd. People looked at their screens, then at Bree and Evan, then back at their screens. The whispers started immediately. You're out of line, Evan said, finally finding his voice. Am I? I'm just sharing the truth about my wife's journey of self-discovery. I turned to address the crowd directly. She wanted to make sure I was the best option available, so she decided to sample the alternatives. I think that shows real dedication to making informed choices, don't you? Bree grabbed Evan's arm. Let's go. Good idea, I said. Enjoy the rest of the festival. And Evan? Good luck with the comparison shopping. They pushed through the crowd, leaving behind a group of stunned onlookers and a social media disaster that would be spreading across town within hours. Miles appeared at my side, grinning. That was brutal. That was necessary. Ness had finally stopped recording, but the damage was already done. By evening, the screenshots would be circulating through every social network in town. Bree's carefully crafted narrative of independence and self-discovery had been replaced with something much more honest and much more humiliating. I spent the rest of the festival enjoying the food, music, and company of friends who were suddenly very interested in hearing my side of the story. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Not the confused, betrayed husband I'd been, but someone with agency and purpose. When I got home that evening, I found 3 voicemails from Bree and a dozen text messages demanding that I call her immediately. I deleted them all without listening and poured myself a drink. Tomorrow, she'd receive the separation papers. Next week, she'd start dealing with the financial realities of her choices. But tonight, I was going to enjoy the satisfaction of watching her perfect plan crumble in real time. The festival had been just the beginning. Bree's social media presence disappeared overnight. The carefully curated Instagram posts stopped, her Facebook went quiet, and even her LinkedIn activity ceased. It was like watching someone erase themselves from the digital world, one platform at a time. The screenshots from the festival had spread faster than I'd anticipated. By Monday morning, half the town seemed to know about Bree's comparison shopping approach to marriage. The story had taken on a life of its own, with details being added and embellished as it passed from person to person. At work, I found myself at the center of an uncomfortable amount of attention. Colleagues who rarely spoke to me were suddenly stopping by my desk to offer support or fish for details. The office gossip network was working overtime, and I was the main character in their favorite new drama. You're famous, Miles said, dropping a coffee on my desk. Janet Morrison called this morning to ask if you were okay. Janet Morrison called you. She called the office, said she wanted to make sure you knew that Bree's marketing contract with their restaurants was being terminated. I looked up from my computer. They fired her? Effective immediately. Apparently her personal drama was becoming a distraction from their business goals. Miles sat down, lowering his voice. Word is spreading fast, Darren. Ness has been trying to do damage control, but it's not working. What kind of damage control? She's been posting about how people shouldn't judge others for following their hearts and exploring their authentic selves. Lots of inspirational quotes about courage and self-discovery. I pulled up Ness's Instagram and scrolled through her recent posts. Miles was right. She'd shifted into full crisis management mode, trying to reframe Bree's affair as a brave journey of personal growth. Look at the comments, Miles said. The response was not what Ness had hoped for. Instead of support and understanding, most of the comments were critical or openly mocking. People were sharing their own screenshots and adding their own commentary about marriage, commitment, and the ethics of exploring options while still married. This is getting out of hand, I said. Is it? Or is it exactly what she deserves? I considered that question for the rest of the morning. Part of me felt satisfied watching Bree's reputation crumble, but another part was starting to worry about the long-term consequences. Small towns have long memories, and this kind of scandal could follow her for years. Then I remembered the text messages I'd found, the casual way she'd discussed our marriage like it was a prison sentence. and the excitement in her voice when she talked about discovering who she really was. My sympathy evaporated. The separation papers were served that afternoon. According to my attorney, Bree had been shocked to receive them and had immediately called asking for an explanation. Margaret had referred her to her own legal counsel, as was standard practice. She seemed to think this was just a temporary arrangement, Margaret told me over the phone. She didn't understand why legal documentation was necessary. What did you tell her? That her husband was protecting his interests, which is exactly what she should be doing. How did she react to that? She hung up. That evening, Bree called me directly for the first time since the festival. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to her message while eating dinner alone in our kitchen. Darren, we need to talk. I don't understand why you're making this so complicated. I thought we agreed this was just a trial separation. Call me back. Her voice sounded strained, less confident than usual. The woman who'd been so sure of her need for exploration and self-discovery was starting to realize that actions had consequences. I didn't call her back. Instead, I spent the evening reviewing my financial situation and planning my next moves. The joint checking account showed several large charges over the past week, expensive dinners, shopping trips, and what looked like a weekend getaway. Bree was spending money like someone who expected to have access to it indefinitely. That was about to change. The next morning, I called the bank and moved the remaining funds from our joint savings account into my new individual account. I left exactly enough to cover the mortgage payment and utilities for the month, plus a small buffer for emergencies. Everything else, our emergency fund, vacation savings, and investment accounts, was now under my sole control. I also called our insurance company and removed Bree from our auto policy. Since she was no longer living in our household, she needed her own coverage. The same logic applied to our homeowner's insurance and other shared policies. By noon, Bree's access to our shared financial resources had been effectively eliminated. She could still use the joint checking account for basic expenses, but her days of funding her new lifestyle with my income were over. The response was immediate. My phone started ringing at 12:47 p.m. and continued ringing every few minutes for the rest of the afternoon. I ignored every call, letting them all go to voicemail. The messages started calm and confused, then became increasingly frantic as Bree realized the scope of what had happened. Darren, my card was declined at lunch. I think there might be a problem with our account. Darren, I called the bank, and they said you moved our savings. We need to talk about this immediately. Darren, this is ridiculous. You can't just cut me off financially because you're upset about the separation. Darren, I'm coming over tonight, whether you want to talk or not. The last message was different in tone, angry instead of pleading, demanding instead of requesting. The woman who'd asked for space to explore her options was now insisting on immediate access to her husband and his resources. I forwarded all the voicemails to my attorney and prepared for Bree's arrival. She showed up at 7:30, using her key to let herself into the house. I was in the living room, reading a manuscript and drinking a beer, when she stormed in. What the hell do you think you're doing? She demanded. I looked up calmly. Reading. It's a thriller about a woman who thinks she can manipulate everyone around her. Very engaging. Don't be cute, Darren. You know what I'm talking about. The financial arrangements? I'm protecting my interests, just like my attorney advised. Your attorney? She stared at me. You hired a lawyer? You filed for separation to explore other relationships. That's a legal matter now, not just a personal one. I never said I wanted a divorce. This was supposed to be temporary. Then you should have been more careful about how you phrased things. I set down my book and looked at her directly. You said you needed to try other men to be sure I was the best choice. That implies you're actively evaluating alternatives to our marriage. I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it? She sat down on the edge of the couch, suddenly looking smaller than when she'd arrived. I meant I needed some space to figure out my feelings. By having an affair with Evan Rusk. It's not an affair. We're separated. We're separated because you were already having an affair with Evan Rusk. She opened her mouth to deny it, then closed it again. We both knew I had evidence, and we both knew she couldn't lie her way out of it. Okay, she said finally. Maybe I handled things badly. Maybe I should have been more honest about my feelings before asking for the separation. Maybe. But that doesn't give you the right to cut me off financially. I have expenses, Darren. I have rent and car payments, and you have a job. My salary barely covers my basic expenses. Then maybe you should reconsider some of your recent lifestyle choices. She stared at me, and I could see her trying to figure out how much I knew. What's that supposed to mean? It means expensive dinners and weekend getaways add up quickly, especially when you're trying to support two people on one income. I haven't been supporting Evan. Haven't you? Who paid for dinner at Chez Laurent last Friday? Who covered the hotel in Bar Harbor over the weekend? Her face went white. How do you know about your expenses? Because they were charged to our joint account, the account that's funded by my direct deposit. Those were special occasions. I'm sure they were. Unfortunately, the special occasion fund has been discontinued. She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back. This is insane. You're acting like I committed some kind of crime. You asked for a separation to explore other relationships. I'm giving you exactly what you asked for. The freedom to support yourself and make your own choices. That's not what I meant, and you know it? Then maybe you should have been more specific. We stared at each other across the living room, and I could see her calculating her next move. The woman who'd been so confident about her need for independence was realizing that independence came with a price tag. I want to come home, she said finally. This isn't your home anymore. You moved out, remember? I want to end the separation. I want us to work on our marriage. Do you? Or do you just want access to our bank account? That's not fair. Fair? I stood up, feeling my carefully controlled anger finally breaking through. You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been having this conversation before you started your affair. Fair would have been being honest about your feelings instead of asking for permission to cheat. Fair would have been considering how your choices might affect your husband before you decided to explore your options. I know I made mistakes. You didn't make mistakes, Bree. You made choices, deliberate, calculated choices. And now you're dealing with the consequences of those choices. So what happens now? Now you figure out how to support yourself and your new lifestyle. You wanted independence? Congratulations, you've got it. She tried several more approaches: tears, anger, bargaining, promises to end things with Evan and focus on our marriage. But I'd heard it all before in the manuscripts I edited. The unfaithful spouse who suddenly wanted to reconcile when faced with real consequences was a tired plot device, and I wasn't interested in playing that story. After an hour of circular arguments, she finally left. I watched her drive away, then poured myself another beer and returned to my thriller novel. The protagonist had just discovered that his enemy's weakness was her inability to accept responsibility for her actions. She kept trying to manipulate her way out of consequences instead of adapting to new realities. It was a very realistic character flaw. 2 months into what was supposed to be a 3-month trial separation, Bree's new life was falling apart faster than her old one had. The financial pressure was getting to her. I could tell from the increasingly desperate tone of her text messages and the fact that her social media presence had shifted from aspirational lifestyle content to passive-aggressive quotes about forgiveness and second chances. Evan, meanwhile, had proven to be less committed to their relationship once it became public and expensive. According to Miles's intelligence network, he'd been seen around town with other women and had stopped posting photos with Bree on his own social media accounts. He's cutting his losses, Miles reported over our weekly drinks at O'Malley's. Janet Morrison saw him at Chez Laurent last weekend with some blonde from out of town. While he's still dating Bree? Apparently, he's taking a page from her book about exploring options. The irony was perfect. Bree had destroyed our marriage to pursue a man who turned out to be exactly as commitment-phobic as she was. They deserved each other, but it seemed like even that wasn't working out. I was settling into my new routine as a separated man. The house felt bigger without Bree's constant presence, but also more peaceful. I could eat what I wanted, watch what I wanted, and sleep without worrying about mysterious text messages in the middle of the night. Work was going well. My productivity had increased dramatically without the distraction of marital problems, and I'd been assigned to edit a high-profile mystery series that could lead to a promotion. My colleagues had stopped treating me like a victim and started treating me like someone who'd successfully navigated a difficult situation. I was actually happy, which made Bree's next move even more surprising. She called on a Thursday evening in late October, her voice shaky and uncertain. Darren, we need to talk, in person. About what? About us. About our future. I have something important to tell you. Can't you tell me over the phone? Please. This is too important for a phone conversation. I agreed to meet her for coffee the next day, curious about what she thought was so urgent. We chose a neutral location, a chain restaurant halfway between our house and her apartment, somewhere we were unlikely to run into anyone we knew. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth and staring out the window. She looked tired, older somehow, like the past 2 months had aged her more than the previous 2 years. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down across from her. What did you want to talk about? She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. I'm pregnant. I stared at her, processing the words. Congratulations. Darren, is Evan excited about becoming a father? It's not Evan's baby. No? It's yours. I leaned back in my seat, studying her face. She looked sincere, hopeful even, like this news might somehow fix everything that had gone wrong between us. When did you find out? Last week. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you. And you're sure it's mine? Of course I'm sure. Based on what? Based on the timing. I got pregnant right before we separated. I pulled out my phone and opened the calendar app. Let's see. You moved out on September 15th? When was your last period before that? She shifted uncomfortably. I don't remember exactly. Approximately? Sometime in late August, I think. And when did you first sleep with Evan? Darren. When, Bree? That's not relevant. It's extremely relevant. If you're asking me to believe this baby is mine, I need to understand the timeline. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her coffee cup. Early August. So you were sleeping with both of us during the window when you got pregnant. It was only a few times with him. Most of the time it was still you and me. Most of the time. Yes. I nodded slowly, as if I was considering her claim. What do you want from me? I want us to try again. I want to work on our marriage and raise this baby together. You want to reconcile. I want to come home. And Evan? That's over. It was never serious anyway. Really? Because 2 months ago you needed to explore your options to be sure I was the best choice. What changed? I learned what I needed to learn. You are the best choice, Darren. You're the man I want to spend my life with. And it has nothing to do with the fact that Evan's been seeing other women? She looked surprised. What? You didn't know? He's been dating around for weeks. I thought that might be why you suddenly decided I was the better option. That's not... yes, I found out about the other women, but that's not why I'm here. No? Then why are you here? Because I'm pregnant with your baby, and I want us to be a family. I signaled the waitress for more coffee, buying time to think. Bree was watching me intently, clearly hoping for some sign that her plan was working. I need to see some documentation, I said finally. What kind of documentation? Medical records, ultrasound results, something that shows when you got pregnant. You don't trust me? Bree, you spent 6 weeks lying to me about an affair, then asked for a separation so you could continue that affair legally. Trust isn't really our strong suit anymore. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded paper. This is from my doctor's appointment yesterday. I unfolded the document and read it carefully. It was a standard prenatal visit summary showing estimated gestational age and due date. According to the medical calculations, conception had occurred in early August. This says you're about 10 weeks pregnant, I said. Yes. Which means conception happened around the first week of August. That's right. When you were already sleeping with Evan. But I was sleeping with you too, more often than with him. I folded the paper and handed it back to her. I want a paternity test. Darren, you're the father. I know you are. Then you won't mind proving it. Those tests are expensive. I'll pay for it. They can be dangerous for the baby. Not anymore. There are non-invasive tests that only require a simple sample. She was quiet for a moment, clearly not expecting this level of resistance. Why can't you just trust me? Because 3 months ago, you told me you needed to try other men to be sure I was the best choice. Now you're pregnant, and suddenly you're sure I'm the father and the best choice. The timing is awfully convenient. It's not convenient. It's honest. I made mistakes, but this baby is yours. Then prove it. And if I do, if the test shows you're the father, then we'll talk about what comes next. Will you consider reconciling? I'll consider a lot of things. But first, I need to know the truth. She agreed to the paternity test, though she wasn't happy about it. We scheduled an appointment for the following week, and I agreed to cover the cost. As we left the restaurant, she tried one more time to convince me that testing was unnecessary. I love you, Darren. I know I hurt you, but I love you, and I want our family to work. We'll see, I said. But I already knew what the test would show. The conception date fell squarely within the period when Bree was spending most of her time with Evan, and the medical timeline didn't lie the way people did. More importantly, I'd been tracking her cycle for months as part of my evidence gathering. I knew exactly when she was fertile, and I knew we hadn't been intimate during that window. We'd barely been speaking during the first week of August, let alone sleeping together. Bree was pregnant, but the baby wasn't mine, and when the test proved that, I'd be ready with my final surprise. The paternity test results came back exactly as I'd expected. According to the lab, there was a 0% probability that I was the father of Bree's baby. The report was clear, scientific, and legally admissible. I called Bree to give her the news. That's impossible, she said when I read her the results. The lab doesn't think so. There must be a mistake. We should do another test. We can do as many tests as you want, Bree. The results aren't going to change. But I was sure. You were sure because you wanted to be sure, but wanting something doesn't make it true. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When she spoke again, her voice was small and defeated. What happens now? Now you deal with the consequences of your choices. Darren, please. I know I made mistakes, but we can still work this out. How? We can raise the baby together anyway. You always wanted children. I wanted children with my wife. You're not my wife anymore. I could be. We could start over. No, we can't. Why not? Because I filed for divorce yesterday. Another silence, longer this time. You what? I filed for divorce. The papers should be served to you within the next few days. But I thought, if the baby wasn't yours, I thought we might... You thought what? That I'd take you back anyway? That I'd help you raise another man's child after you destroyed our marriage to be with him? I thought you might forgive me. I did forgive you, Bree, but forgiveness doesn't mean I have to keep making the same mistakes. What am I supposed to do? You're supposed to figure it out. You wanted independence, remember? You wanted to explore your options and live for yourself. Congratulations, you got exactly what you asked for. I can't do this alone. You're not alone. You have Evan. Evan won't return my calls. Then I guess you'll have to find other options to explore. I hung up before she could respond, then sat in my quiet house and considered how much my life had changed in 4 months. I'd gone from being a betrayed husband to a free man with a clear conscience and a bright future. The divorce would be finalized within a few months. Bree would get half the value of the house and her own retirement accounts, but nothing else. No spousal support, no claim on my future income, and no access to the life we'd built together. She'd traded a stable marriage for an exciting affair, and the affair had turned out to be as temporary as most exciting things were. Now she was pregnant, alone, and facing the reality that actions have consequences. I poured myself a drink and raised it in a toast to new beginnings. Not for both of us, just for me. Outside, it was starting to snow, the first real snowfall of the season. By morning, everything would be covered in a clean white blanket, hiding the old landscape under something fresh and new. I was looking forward to seeing how different the world looked in the light of day. The divorce papers were served to Bree on a Tuesday morning in November, delivered to her apartment by a process server who found her coming home from what appeared to be a prenatal appointment. According to my attorney, she'd been shocked by the speed of the proceedings and had immediately called asking for a meeting to discuss terms. She seems to think there's room for negotiation, Margaret told me over the phone. She's requesting spousal support and wants to keep the house. On what grounds? Emotional distress and financial hardship due to her pregnancy. I almost laughed. She's claiming emotional distress? It's a common tactic. She's also arguing that the separation was temporary and that you're proceeding with divorce against her wishes. Do we have a problem? Not with the evidence you've provided. Her own text messages make it clear that she initiated the separation to pursue other relationships. The paternity test results eliminate any claim she might have had regarding the pregnancy, and the financial records show that she was spending marital assets on her affair. What about the house? Maine is an equitable distribution state, so she's entitled to half the marital assets. But since she moved out voluntarily and has been living elsewhere for 3 months, she has no claim to continued residence. So she gets half the value, but she can't move back in? Exactly. You can buy out her share or force a sale, but she can't compel you to maintain the status quo. I chose to buy out her share. The house had been my sanctuary during the separation, and I wasn't interested in selling it or sharing it with someone who'd already demonstrated her commitment to our partnership. The financial settlement was straightforward. Bree would receive half the equity in the house, half our joint savings, and her own retirement accounts. She would not receive spousal support, ongoing health insurance, or any claim on my future income. It was fair, legal, and final. But I had one last surprise planned for the woman who'd thought she could have everything her way. The final divorce hearing was scheduled for the first week of December, exactly 3 months after Bree had moved out to explore her options. She showed up to court looking tired and obviously pregnant, accompanied by a lawyer who seemed less confident than mine. The proceedings were routine. Both attorneys presented their cases. The judge reviewed our settlement agreement, and Bree was asked if she understood the terms and agreed to them. I do, she said, though her voice was barely audible. Mrs. Halloway, do you have any objections to the proposed division of assets? No, Your Honor. And you understand that this settlement includes no provision for spousal support? Yes, Your Honor. Any objections to the timeline for property transfer? No, Your Honor. The judge signed the decree, and just like that, our 8-year marriage was officially over. Bree was no longer my wife, no longer my responsibility, and no longer my problem. but I wasn't quite finished with her yet. As we left the courthouse, Bree tried to approach me in the parking lot. "Darren, can we talk for a minute?" "About what?" "About the future, about how we handle things going forward. There is no we anymore, Bree. There's no future to handle. But we'll still see each other around town. We have mutual friends, shared history." We had shared history. Now we have a legal settlement. She looked around the parking lot as if checking to see who might be watching. "I know you're angry with me, but I hope someday you can understand why I did what I did. I understand perfectly. You did what you did because you thought you could get away with it. That's not true, isn't it? You thought you could have your affair, keep it secret, and then manipulate me into accepting a trial separation that would let you continue the affair legally. When that didn't work out the way you planned, you thought you could use a pregnancy to force a reconciliation. I never tried to manipulate you. Every conversation we've had for the past 6 months has been an attempt at manipulation. I was trying to save our marriage. You were trying to save yourself from the consequences of destroying our marriage." She was quiet for a moment, and I could see her trying to find another angle, another approach that might get her what she wanted. "What about forgiveness?" she asked finally. "What about second chances? What about them? Don't you believe people can change? Don't you believe in redemption?" "I believe people can change when they want to. But you don't want to change, Bree. You want to avoid consequences. That's not fair. You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means." I started walking toward my car, but she followed me. "Darren, wait. I know I hurt you, but I'm hurting too. I'm alone, I'm pregnant, I don't have anywhere to go. You have an apartment. I can't afford it much longer, and when the baby comes, I'll need help. Then you should call Evan. Evan won't talk to me. Then you should call someone who will. Who? My friends won't return my calls. My family thinks I'm a disgrace. I don't have anyone." I stopped walking and turned to face her. "Whose fault is that? I know it's my fault, but nothing. You made choices, Bree. You chose to have an affair. You chose to ask for a separation. You chose to prioritize your own desires over everyone else's feelings. Those choices had consequences, and now you're living with them. So you're just going to abandon me? I'm not abandoning you. I'm declining to rescue you from problems you created for yourself. What's the difference? The difference is responsibility. You're responsible for your own life now. That's what independence means." I reached my car and unlocked the door, but before I could get in, she grabbed my arm. "Please," she said, and for the first time I heard genuine desperation in her voice. "I know I don't deserve help, but I'm begging you. I don't know what else to do." I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. She was still beautiful, but there was something hollow about her now, something diminished. The confidence and vitality that had attracted me to her in college were gone, replaced by fear and regret. For just a moment, I felt sorry for her. Then I remembered the text messages, the lies, the casual way she'd discussed our marriage like it was a burden she was eager to shed. I remembered the excitement in her voice when she talked about Evan, the way she'd glowed with happiness while destroying everything we'd built together. "You said you needed to live for yourself," I said quietly. "Well, now you can." I got in my car and drove away, leaving her standing alone in the courthouse parking lot. That evening, I celebrated at O'Malley's with Miles and a few other friends from work. The drinks flowed freely, and for the first time in months, I felt genuinely happy. Not relieved, not vindicated, but actually happy. "So what's next?" Miles asked as we worked on our third round. "Next, I focus on my career, maybe travel a little, figure out what I want to do with the rest of my life." "Any regrets?" I considered the question seriously. "About the marriage ending? No. About how it ended? No. About how I handled it?" I shrugged. I could have been more vindictive. "More vindictive? You destroyed her reputation, cut off her finances, and left her pregnant and alone?" I gave her exactly what she asked for, the freedom to make her own choices and live with the consequences. That's one way to look at it. It's the only way to look at it. We stayed until closing time, telling stories and making plans for the future. As I drove home through the quiet streets of our small city, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete peace of mind. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway, but it felt welcoming rather than empty. Tomorrow, I'd start the process of making it truly mine, repainting, rearranging, maybe even renovating the kitchen that Bree had always complained about. I poured myself one last drink and sat in my living room, looking around at the space that was now entirely my own. No more shared decisions, no more compromises, no more wondering what secrets were hiding in someone else's phone. Just me, my choices, and my consequences. Outside, snow was falling again, heavier than before. By morning, the world would be clean and white and new, ready for whatever came next. I raised my glass in a final toast to the woman who taught me that sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people get exactly what they ask for. She'd wanted to live for herself and explore her options. Now she had a lifetime to do exactly that.